The room feels different right now. The air, the light. Something in your body knows this moment isn't casual, and this isn't just another video you stumbled across while scrolling. Your system brought you here because there's a frequency shift happening in real time. And the window, the actual energetic window your soul has been building toward, it's open right now. But here's what most people don't realize: it won't stay open. 48 hours, that's what you have. Not in some metaphorical someday when you feel ready sense. 48 actual hours before the specific convergence of energy, readiness, and cosmic timing that exists in this moment collapses. And I need you to understand something before we go further. This isn't a scare tactic. This isn't me trying to manipulate you into some panicked decision. This is quantum mechanics. This is neuroscience. This is how consciousness evolution actually works when you strip away the comfortable illusions we tell ourselves about having infinite time. You've felt it, haven't you? The pressure, not stress from your job or your relationships, though it might be showing up there too, but something underneath, something that makes it hard to sleep at your normal hours. Something that makes ordinary conversations feel hollow. Something that keeps pulling your attention toward a question you can't quite articulate. That's not anxiety. That's your field trying to tell you that you're standing at a threshold and the door is open, but it won't stay that way. Let me show you something about how divine timelines actually work, because everything you've been taught about manifestation and soul purpose, it's incomplete. They tell you the universe has infinite patience, that your soul's journey is eternal, that there's no rush. And technically, that's true. Your connection to Source isn't going anywhere. Your spiritual pot, Entiel, isn't going to evaporate. But the specific pathway you've been building, the exact set of circumstances, the precise neurological readiness, the particular relationship dynamics, the specific frequency you've been calibrating toward for months or possibly years, that configuration is temporary. Think of it like this: your consciousness has been preparing a landing pad. Every synchronicity you noticed, every pattern you broke, every moment you chose differently than your conditioning, those weren't random, they were construction. You've been building energetic infrastructure, creating the conditions where a higher timeline version of you could actually anchor into this reality. But infrastructure exists in time. The people who are in position to help you right now might not be there next week. The opportunity that requires exactly this version of you won't wait for you to become ready later. The neurological window, where your brain is plastic enough to integrate this level of change, it has a shelf life. And here's the part that most spiritual teachers won't tell you, because it sounds too harsh, too limiting, too much like pressure. If you don't walk through this door in the next 48 hours, it doesn't come back around in the same way. You don't lose your path. You don't get abandoned by the universe, but you do enter what I call a recalibration cycle, typically 3 to 9 months, where you have to rebuild the momentum from a lower baseline. And the thing is, you already know this. Some part of you has been feeling the countdown without having language for it. So let's get specific about what's actually happening in your field right now and why this 48-hour window is real, not manufactured. Your nervous system has been processing an enormous amount of new information over the last several months, new awareness about who you really are, new recognition of patterns you've been running unconsciously, new downloads about what you're actually here to do, and simultaneously your old survival programming has been fighting back hard. You've probably noticed old triggers resurfacing with almost theatrical intensity. Relationships that seemed resolved suddenly flaring up again. Doubts you thought you'd moved past coming back louder than ever. Self-sabotage patterns showing up right when you're on the verge of something big. Most people think that means they're going backward. They think it means they're failing, regressing, losing their progress. But neuroscientifically, here's what's actually happening. Your brain has reached what researchers call a critical transition state. You're holding two incompatible operating systems at the same time, the old survival-based neural pathways and the new consciousness-based ones. And your system can't sustain that contradiction indefinitely. Within 48 to 72 hours, one pattern will dominate. Either the new pathways cement and become your new baseline, or the old ones reassert control and your system snaps back to familiar suffering, because at least that's stable. This is why the timing matters. This is why the urgency you're feeling. G isn't manufactured. Your nervous system knows it's at a tipping point. And here's where the quantum mechanics comes in, because this isn't just biology, this is how reality itself works at the deepest level. In quantum physics, particles exist in superposition, multiple states simultaneously, until they're observed. The act of observation collapses the wave function into one specific reality. You've been in superposition, multiple timelines, multiple versions of your life, multiple futures, all existing as probability waves. And this 48-hour window is your observation moment, the moment where your choice, your action, your conscious participation collapses the wave function into one dominant timeline. But here's what makes this so precise. The field only stays in superposition for so long. The quantum foam, the space of infinite possibility, it's not static. It's constantly shifting based on the choices happening around you, the collective consciousness, the energetic weather of the planet. Right now, in this specific window, the conditions are aligned for you to lock into the timeline that requires the most integrated version of you, not the fantasy version, not the spiritual bypassed version, the one that can hold your power and your trauma, your light and your shadow, your gifts and your humanity. But if you hesitate, if you wait for more clarity, more readiness, more proof, the superposition collapses anyway, just not toward the timeline you've been building toward. It collapses toward the default, the path of least resistance, the familiar suffering your system knows how to navigate. So let's talk about how you recognize which timeline is actually on the table right now, because this is important. The timeline that's available to you in this window, it's not the one that makes you comfortable. It's not the one where everything is easy and everyone approves and you don't have to risk anything. That timeline was never real. That's the fantasy your ego uses to keep you safe from growth. The timeline that's closing in 48 hours is the one that requires you to become someone you've been terrified to be. And I don't mean terrified in some dramatic, obvious way. I mean terrified in the subtle way that makes you scroll social media instead of making the call. Terrified in the way that makes you pick fights with people who support you because vulnerability feels dangerous. Terrified in the way that makes you suddenly doubt everything you know right when you're about to act on it. The version of you that can hold this timeline, they don't need permission. They don't wait for certainty. They don't hedge their bets. They move with the knowing that comes from the body, not the mind. And your ego is terrified of that person because that person can't be controlled through fear anymore. So here's what's been happening. Your higher self, your future self, the version of you that already exists in the timeline you're reaching for, they've been sending signals, synchronicities that are too precise to ignore, opportunities that appeared out of nowhere, people saying exactly what you needed to hear at exactly the right moment, dreams that felt more real than waking life. And every time you noticed, every time you almost acted, you've been strengthening the bridge between timelines. But, and this is critical, bridges require both sides to hold. Your future self is reaching back, but you have to reach forward. And the reaching has to happen in physical reality, not just in meditation or intention or someday planning. It has to happen in the next 48 hours with enough consciousness and enough courage that your field registers it as a genuine shift. Let me give you the actual protocol, because this isn't about positive thinking or vision boards or waiting for a sign. This is about working with the mechanics of how consciousness and matter interact. First, 24 hours. Your task is to make one choice from your future self instead of your survival self. Not 10 choices, not a complete life overhaul. One choice. But it has to be a choice you've been avoiding because it requires you to be visible or honest or certain in a way that your conditioning says isn't safe. Maybe it's the conversation you've been putting off because you don't know how it will go. Maybe it's the investment in yourself that your scarcity programming says is irresponsible. Maybe it's the boundary you need to set that will disappoint someone you've been trying to please. Maybe it's admitting what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. The specific choice will be obvious to you, not because it feels easy, but because thinking about it makes your chest tight, and your mind immediately offers 17 reasons why now isn't the right time. That's the one. That's the choice that anchors the new timeline. And you need to make it within the first 24 hours with full consciousness, not impulsively, not reactively, but deliberately, knowing this is you choosing your future over your familiar. And here's what happens when you do that. Your system will register the choice. Your nervous system will recognize that something fundamental just shifted. The field around you will begin reorganizing to match the frequency of the person who makes choices like that. You won't see all the changes immediately. You won't get instant proof that you made the right call. But energetically, you've just collapsed the wave function. You've chosen which timeline you're committing to. But, and this is where most people lose it, the second 24 hours is when the backlash comes. Now, your old programming, the part of your nervous system that's been keeping you safe through familiar suffering for decades, is going to freak out because it just felt you choose something unknown, something that can't be controlled through the old strategies, and it's going to throw everything it has at you to pull you back. You'll wake up in the second 24 hours and suddenly doubt everything. The choice you made will seem stupid, impulsive, wrong. You'll catastrophize outcomes. You'll see evidence everywhere that confirms you should reverse the decision. People in your life might react in ways that trigger your deepest wounds, not because they're bad people, but because the field is testing whether you meant it, whether you're actually ready to hold this new frequency, or whether you're still available to be controlled by fear. This is the moment. This is where the timeline either cements or collapses. And your job in the second 24 hours isn't to feel good about your choice. It isn't to have it all work out yet. It's simply to not reverse it. To not people please your way back to safety. To not rationalize why the old way was actually fine. To sit with the discomfort of having chosen growth over comfort. And let your nervous system learn that you can survive that. If you can do that, if you can make the choice in the first 24 hours and not abandon it in the second 24 hours, the timeline anchors, your field locks into the new frequency, and then the physical reality starts reorganizing to match, usually within 3 to 5 days, not because you manifested it through positive thinking, but because you became the version of you who exists in that reality, and reality has no choice but to reflect that back. Now, let's talk about what happens if you don't do this. If this window closes without your conscious participation, because I need you to understand the stakes without scaring you into paralysis. If you let this 48 hours pass without making the choice, without anchoring the timeline, you don't lose everything. You don't get kicked off your spiritual path. The universe doesn't abandon you, but you do enter a recalibration cycle. And here's what that means practically. The momentum you've built the energetic infrastructure, the specific convergence of readiness and opportunity, it dissipates, not instantly, but gradually over the next week or two. The people who were in position to support this version of your journey, they move on to other focuses, the opportunity that required exactly this moment of courage. It closes or goes to someone else who was ready, the neurological plasticity your brain had reached till it stabilizes back toward the old patterns because they're more familiar. And then you're looking at 3 to 9 months of what feels like going backward. And not because you're being punished, but because you have to rebuild from a lower set point. You have to recreate the conditions. You have to wait for another convergence. And the thing is, it's harder the second time. Not impossible, but harder, because now you're also carrying the weight of having missed it once. The doubt becomes louder. The fear becomes more convincing. The part of you that says, see, you're not actually ready, you're not actually chosen, you should just accept the life you have. It gets more evidence to work with. I've watched this happen to people over and over. Brilliant, powerful, genuinely awakened souls who feel the call, who see the window, who know exactly what they need to do. And then they blink. They wait for one more sign. They tell themselves they'll do it next week. When they feel more prepared, they let fear dress up as wisdom and caution dress up as responsibility. And 6 months later, they're sitting in the same patterns, the same struggles, the same life, except now there's this ache underneath everything, this knowing that they had a moment and they let it pass. And look, I'm not saying this to scare you into some panicked unconscious action. Panic is just another form of the old programming. What I'm saying is, respect the timing. Respect the fact that consciousness operates in rhythms and cycles and windows. Respect the fact that your soul orchestrated this entire setup. Every struggle, every synchronicity, every piece of preparation to get you to exactly this moment. And the highest honoring of all that work, all that growth, all that building is to actually walk through the door when it opens. Because here's what this urgency really is. Here's what this pressure in your chest, this restlessness in your system, this sense of now or never actually means. It's your higher self reaching back through time to pull you forward. It's the version of you that already exists in the timeline you're building toward, and they can see what's possible. They can see what opens up if you choose courage right now. They can see the life, the relationships, the work, the impact that becomes available. Someday, not in theory, but actually accessible if you move in the next 48 hours. And they're not being cruel. They're not pressuring you because they don't trust you or because they think you're weak. They're reaching back because they love you, because they know you're capable of this, because they can see that all the preparation is done, all the pieces are in place, and the only thing standing between where you are and where you're meant to be is this one choice. This one moment of choosing your becoming over your belonging, your truth over your safety, your expansion over your comfort. The 48-hour window isn't a punishment. It's not artificial scarcity. It's not manipulation. It's the universe saying, you're ready, the door is open, everything you've been building toward is available. Now. Not because you've earned it or proven yourself or finally become worthy. You were always worthy. But because worthiness without readiness is just potential. And you've reached readiness. Your nervous system can hold this. Your consciousness can integrate this. Your life can accommodate this. Right now. In this window. So I need you to get really honest with yourself about what you're going to do with the next 48 hours. Not what you hope to do or what you think you should do or what you'll do if it feels right. What you're actually going to do. Because your soul is listening, your field is listening, The quantum foam is listening, and whatever you choose in the next 48 hours, that's the timeline that locks in. If you choose courage, even scared courage, even imperfect courage, you lock into the timeline where you become the person who chooses growth over comfort. And that person, they get access to everything you've been reaching for. Not because they're special, but because they're congruent. Because their actions match their knowing. Because they stopped waiting for permission or certainty or the perfect conditions. If you choose safety, if you choose to wait, if you choose to let this window pass because it feels too risky or too fast or too unknown, you lock into the timeline where you keep learning the same lessons at progressively more intense levels until you finally choose differently. And look, there's no judgment in that. Sometimes we're not ready. Sometimes the fear is too big. Sometimes we need more time. But let's not pretend it's the same thing as choosing growth. Let's not dress up avoidance as wisdom. You know which choice you're here to make. You knew before you clicked on this video. That's why you're still listening. That's why something in your body relaxed when I said 48 hours. Because finally, someone was naming the thing you've been feeling but couldn't articulate. The countdown you've been sensing without having language for it. So here's what I want you to do. And I mean actually do, not just think about doing. In the next 4 hours, not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but in the next 4 hours, identify the one choice your future self would make right now. The choice that scares you and calls to you at the same time. The choice that your conditioning immediately offers 17 reasons to postpone. That's the one. That's your first 24-hour task. And then make it, not perfectly, not with all the answers, not with certainty about how it will turn out, but make it consciously, knowing this is you collapsing the wave function. This is you choosing which timeline you're committing to. This is you honoring everything your soul has been building toward by actually walking through the door when it opens. And in the second 24 hours, when the doubt comes, when the backlash hits, when everyone around you seems to be confirming that you made a mistake, remember this moment. Remember that you chose from your knowing, not your fear. Remember that the discomfort is just your old programming losing its grip on you. Remember that your job isn't to feel good about the choice yet. It's just not to reverse it. To let your nervous system learn that you can survive choosing your truth. The window is open. 48 hours, the timeline you've been building is available. Your higher self is reaching back. Everything you need is already in place. The only question is, are you going to walk through the door, or are you going to watch it close and tell yourself there will be another chance later? You already know the answer. Your body already knows. Now you just have to let your actions catch up to your knowing. 48 hours. The clock started the moment you felt the pull to watch this. Make it count.